I sat in the dimly lit kitchen, sipping on tea, wondering if Ellie would ever call me. Ever since my husband David passed away, the house felt quieter than ever. I tried to fill the silence by tending to the garden, which David loved, and by keeping busy with small chores. Our children, Ellie and Thomas, had grown up and moved away, but they were different. Thomas visited when he could, and we'd chat like old friends. But Ellie, she barely spoke to me. It wasn't always this way. Ellie used to be close to her father, and after he died, I felt as if I'd lost her too. She blamed me, though I could never understand why. Perhaps it was because I was the quieter one, the simple mother compared to David's lively, ambitious personality. I used to think our bond would heal over time, but days turned into years without so much as a holiday visit from her. Then, one day, Thomas called. "Mom, have you heard about Ellie?" he asked, his voice holding a tension I hadn't heard before. "No, she never tells me anything these days," I replied, trying not to sound too bitter. "Well, she's getting married to a guy named Nick," Thomas said, sounding hesitant. "Married?" I repeated, feeling a pang in my chest. She didn't even mention she was seeing anyone. "Yeah, I know. I haven't met him either, and to be honest, I don't have the best feeling about it," he admitted, sounding more like my old friend than my son in that moment. After that call, I felt an odd mix of emotions. I was hurt that Ellie hadn't told me herself, but hopeful that maybe she'd reach out soon. I waited for days, wondering if she'd call, even just to talk about the wedding plans. Finally, she did. The phone rang late one evening, and I picked it up, my heart pounding. "Mom, I got married last week," Ellie said coldly, as if it were just a formality. Her words hit me like a punch. "Ellie, why didn't you tell me?" I managed to say, keeping my voice steady. "I didn't think you'd care, but now I need a favor," she replied, her tone more direct than I'd ever heard it. "What is it?" I asked, bracing myself. "Nick and I need a place to stay for a while. Your house has so much extra space. We thought we could stay there temporarily." My mind whirled. I wanted to say no, but I couldn't find the words. "Well, I guess there's room, but it's just me here. Are you sure this is what you want?" "Mom, we're coming. I've already canceled my lease," she said sharply, leaving me no room to argue. The following week, Ellie and Nick arrived with movers. I watched them unload box after box, filling the house with noise and laughter that felt foreign. Ellie barely greeted me, and Nick, a tall man with a confident smirk, gave me a quick, dismissive nod. The house no longer felt like mine. That first night, I made a simple dinner, hoping to sit down together. But when I called Ellie, she waved me off, saying, "We're heading out. Don't wait up." I sat alone at the table, wondering if I'd made a mistake. Days passed, and their presence grew heavier. They treated my home like a hotel, coming and going without a word, ignoring my attempts to connect. They left dishes unwashed, clothes piled in the hallway, and loud music blaring late into the night. I began to feel like a stranger in my own home. One Saturday morning, I noticed Ellie and Nick setting up tables and a grill in the backyard. Curious, I asked, "Are we having a party?" Ellie rolled her eyes. "Didn't I tell you? We're hosting a barbecue for some friends. Try to stay out of sight, okay? It'd be awkward if you were around." Her words stung, but I nodded, retreating inside. From my bedroom window, I watched as guests trampled over David's garden, laughing and drinking. It was as if every trace of him, of us, was being erased. That evening, after the guests left, I couldn't help but confront Ellie. "Ellie, this is still my home. You can't just take over without asking." She looked at me with a mocking smile. "Oh, don't be dramatic. You should be grateful we're here. Besides, isn't this all Dad's money anyway?" Her words cut deep. "I worked hard to keep this house after he passed," I replied, my voice shaking. Nick chimed in, his tone dripping with contempt. "Yeah, living off the pension. Real hard work, huh?" It was clear then that they saw me as nothing more than an obstacle, a nuisance. They expected me to sit quietly in the background while they ran wild. A week later, after cleaning up yet another mess they'd left behind, I reached my breaking point. I called Thomas, my voice trembling as I told him everything. "Mom, I knew Nick was bad news, but I had no idea it was this bad," he said, his voice filled with concern. "Listen, I think they're planning to stay indefinitely. You should be careful. They might even be eyeing the inheritance." The thought hadn't occurred to me before, but now it made perfect sense. They were here to secure their future, to make sure they got their share, and maybe even more. With Thomas's support, I made a plan. I didn't want Ellie and Nick to know about the small investments I'd made over the years. Thanks to David's advice, I had enough in dividends to live comfortably. I'd kept it a secret, not wanting them to see me as a source of money. But now I knew I had to act. A few days later, I approached Ellie. "I'm thinking of selling the house," I said calmly, watching her reaction. "What? You can't just sell it," she snapped, panic flashing in her eyes. "Where would we go?" "I'll be moving in with Thomas and his wife. They've offered to help with the transition," I said, holding her gaze. Nick's face turned red. "We thought we'd be able to stay here until we found something permanent. This is our family home." I couldn't help but smile at the irony. "It's my home, Nick. I didn't realize you felt so attached." The days that followed were tense. Ellie and Nick moved about the house like shadows, watching me suspiciously. I knew they were trying to find a way to stay, but I held firm. The night before I left, I quietly packed my things, ready to leave the place I'd once called home. The next morning, as I was about to walk out the door, Ellie blocked my way. "You're just going to leave? After everything?" "Yes," I said softly, "but not before I set things right." I handed her a small envelope. Inside was a letter explaining my decision to leave everything to Thomas. I had no obligation to them anymore, no reason to sacrifice my peace. Ellie's face twisted with anger. "You think this is fair?" I met her gaze, feeling a calm I hadn't felt in years. "I think it's what's right." As I walked away, I could hear Ellie's furious voice calling after me, but I didn't look back. I was free. In the weeks that followed, I settled into my new life with Thomas and his family. I found solace in the small things, enjoying the laughter of my grandchildren, the warmth of my daughter-in-law, and the peace I'd longed for. One afternoon, Thomas sat beside me on the porch. "Do you ever regret it, Mom, leaving them behind?" I shook my head, watching the sunset. "No, Thomas. I did what I had to do." Ellie and Nick eventually found a place to stay, but I heard from Thomas that their relationship was strained. Without me as their safety net, they had to rely on each other, and it seemed the weight of it was too much. They stopped by once, feigning kindness, but it was clear they wanted something. I simply smiled and offered them tea, making it clear that those days were over. For the first time in years, I felt at peace. I'd finally reclaimed my life, my happiness, and my dignity.